we're having a Judiciary Committee meeting on the new bill that we've introduced, the Justice and Policing Act. It'll be at 10 o'clock Eastern time in Washington. I'll be there. Most members of the Judiciary Committee will be there. It is a bill the public wants and reforms the public demands. We've seen an outpouring of public interest in reforming police departments and in justice for Black people who have been, over the years, the whole time they've been in this country, the subject of police misconduct and over-policing. Obviously, George Floyd is the most recent case, and it was just stunning to see it on camera live as it occurred, with public warning him of the fact that Mr. Floyd was dying, might not have a pulse, was bleeding from his mouth, and the officer just put a smirk on his face, kept his sunglasses on the top of his head, seemed to be putting more pressure on his neck, and didn't care, and kept his knee there for another 2 minutes or so. Just stunning and disgusting. So the new bill will do a lot of things to give police departments reform. We can only do so much at the federal level, but we're going to do what we can do. And I'm pleased that parts or all of 3 bills that I've introduced over the years, mostly coming out of Ferguson, Missouri several years ago, this has been an issue of mine for quite a while, are incorporated into the bill. One is the independent prosecutor aspect of the bill, to say that any police person, law enforcement person, who commits an act of deadly force, that they would have the determination of whether or not charges would be brought on the state level, brought by an independent prosecutor. The states would have to be given federal grants or encouraged through federal grants to set up such a system, and that they'd have to set up a system where either other DAs from other counties or maybe people from the state attorney general's office, but however the state came up with it, and they'd be given grants from the federal government as an incentive to do this. It's an appearance of an impropriety at a minimum. The law enforcement people are the witnesses for the DAs in their cases that they bring, and many of the retired law enforcement personnel work as investigators for the DA. Also, the DAs get elected, and when they run for office, they oftentimes are the beneficiaries of an endorsement and a contribution from the police association. Police associations, deputy sheriff's associations, et cetera, are all involved in the electoral process with endorsements and contributions, which does make the appearance, if not the reality, of a conflict. So to save the DAs of that appearance and to make sure there isn't a conflict, this bill is necessary. It's been endorsed by the Chicago Tribune, the NAACP, and Governor Cuomo has been talking about it now for several weeks. Part of that bill, which we did with Lacey Clay of St. Louis and the Ferguson, Missouri area, would require better police training, emphasis on diversity training, racial differences, ethnic differences, and ways to deal with crises and in different manners than force. That was incorporated into the bill as well. And then we had a portion of another bill, HR 119, that would have required the collection of data of use of deadly force. And that's going to be part of the bill. I have to collect more than just deadly force, but there will be a data collection portion of the bill too. We're pleased those were in there. We worked on the qualified immunity section. There will be a change in qualified immunity. There were a lot of different ways to look at it. Mostly, I think it's going to directly say that if it's a law enforcement agency, there will be a different standard of qualified immunity, and one that says you don't have to have the same exact set of facts and the same standard of proof as you have to have now. And it'll make it easier for citizens to get relief in a 1983 civil rights action in a federal court. That has been, and if you get that type of action, it does what civil actions do. It not only rewards the victim with compensation, and normally in 1983 actions, the city indemnifies the officer, so there is a pool of money there, but it also gives the city, who indemnifies the misdeed, and the police department who employs the officer who was involved in the violation, a higher calling and purpose in saying that the rules and the policing of those rules internally are stronger, so as to avoid the expense of violations of civil rights. Not just the civil rights violation itself, which should be sufficient, but the financial cost to the department, possibly to the officers as a result of budget changes, because the budget could be, that money could come out of the police budget or it could come out of the city budget at large. But that was a change. There were other angles to look at it, whether to do it based on the violation of the Constitution, whether it be a Fourth Amendment violation or Eighth Amendment violation, whether or not it be the amount of damages that was caused, great bodily injury or death. But the decision was to go with law enforcement. There was also a decision to have a database of policemen who've been fired so that other police departments will know about them. The case that most best example of this of being a problem was in the Cleveland, Cuyahoga County situation, where an officer who had been fired by a previous police department, and Cleveland didn't know about it, Cuyahoga County didn't know about it, the officer, when he applied, didn't tell him, was the officer who drew his gun without true justification, in my opinion, and shot and killed 14-year-old Tremere Rice, who had a toy pistol. And the officer just came on the scene and within 2 seconds shot and killed Tremere Rice. If Cleveland would have known about that previous incident, he might not have been hired. He obviously was not well equipped to deal with that situation. There will also be a banning of chokeholds and carotid artery type actions, which is the knee on the neck, in federal law enforcement, and incentives for states to do the same. There will be requirements on federal officials to have body cams and dash cameras, and incentives through grants for the local police agencies who have gotten federal funds to use those federal funds to have the body cams on the officers, to have them on at all times, and to have dash cams on as well. There are provisions in there for some local community organizations to have grants to try to come up with ideas of policing in their communities that might be helpful. There's an issue. Those are the major issues I think that are in the bill right now. And I'm pleased that the bill will be introduced. We will discuss it. We'll have a distinguished panel of witnesses on Wednesday, including family of victims, attorneys of victims, leaders of civil rights organizations, and police organizations. Right now we have approximately 168 or so sponsors of the bill in the House, all Democrats. We're hoping to get some Republican sponsorship, but much of the discussion has been on a few outliers in the Republican caucus and their ifs. So that's not a good indication that we'll have necessarily any or much Republican support. And the same problem goes in the Senate, but Senator Harris and Senator Booker will be leading the effort there. We're going to have to put help with working with the public whose cries have been loud, but to make sure Mitch McConnell hears them and he schedules the bill when it comes over for discussion, hearing, and votes in the Senate. Our hearing will be Wednesday, and then we'll have a vote when we come back the week of June the 29th. I imagine it'll probably be the day of the 30th. It'll be that the week we come back, and I feel confident we'll have the votes to pass it in the House. We'll also be having a hearing on the 22nd of June concerning the Justice Department and some of the actions that they have taken lately that we've found to be objectionable. We will not have Bill Barr at that hearing, but we will have some of the people who have questioned Bill Barr's activities, and they're willing to come and speak to our committee, people within the department or who have been within the department. So that'll be an important hearing as well. This has been a very devastating time for our communities. What we've seen has been a great outpouring of young people predominantly. Most of the people seem to be under 30, but some over as well, both white and black, who are very concerned appropriately about police misconduct and Black Lives Matter. I've been encouraged to see this outpouring of interest in government and in security and safety for all of our people, and understanding that Black Lives Matter is important, and that there has been a miscarriage of justice in this country since 1619, when the first slaves came to this country. 250, give or take, years of slavery. We had that brief period of Reconstruction, and then we had, followed by the Hayes-Tilden election in 1876, starting in 1877, Jim Crow laws around this country that really never went out of fashion, but we did get rid of segregation per se. And then we had de facto Jim Crow in many parts of the South in particular. Still working to rid ourselves of some of those vestiges of those laws from those days and the after effects. I introduced, when I was first elected to Congress, an apology for slavery and Jim Crow. It did finally pass the House, and it passed the Senate. It passed the House in 2008. It passed the Senate in 2009 or 10 in a little bit different fashion, only in that one senator put a provision in the Senate that said it would have nothing to do with reparations. It was never intended to have anything to do with reparations, but because of that, there was hostility from concurring with their resolution and having the same resolution then pass the House in the 111th Congress. If we would have done that, which we should have, and I supported it, and so did this Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and so did the NAACP, but there were some members of the Black Caucus that did not support it, we would have had what I intended to have, which was a joint resolution which allows for a program in the rotunda to celebrate the passage and to put it into action, which was to rectify the lingering consequences of slavery and Jim Crow, and to have a commission set up. And my thought was that Bill Clinton at the time would be the right person to head it up, because he had talked during his administration about these problems. In fact, I had encouraged him while he was president to have such a commission, and he did not do it. So it was unfortunate, but I still thought he was the best person to bring our country together. This may come about because it's a lot more than just policing. It's public education, it's child care, it's job training, it's jobs, it's social justice, social welfare, it's SNAP payments, it's WIC payments, it's all kind of things to give people an opportunity to participate in the American dream and to succeed. So we're going that direction. Karen Bass has done a great job as the chair of the CBC and a member of the Judiciary Committee and the present chair of the Crime Committee and Judiciary. As I say, I'll be there on Wednesday and participating, probably emphasizing each person will be given certain areas they hope we will take with our questioning, and mine will be the areas that I've championed over the years, particularly the independent prosecutor portion, as well as the training and collection of data. And I think others, we were part of the qualified immunity, but that's more Justin Amos and other people. And we were part of the police firings data collection, which I got to give a shout out to Tawana Stout Mitchell. She suggested that to me in a social media post. I hadn't seen it, and I took it up and kind of helped bring that to the fore, and it contributed to that being part of the bill, I believe. So I thank her for her input. With that, I'd like to respond to questions.
Congressman, does qualified immunity, does that apply to the city, or exactly how would that work?
It would apply to the cities have qualified immunity now, local government, so I guess the county too, in cases of sheriff's departments, and very high standard that you have to have the same exact set of facts to show that there was notice given. We would change that set of facts and giving notice, and we'd also change the standard of proof to a little less, not willful, but reckless, but negligent and willful actions, and not willful but negligent actions. So that has to be changed. It's important for a lot of the civil rights groups and individuals, and I think it'll be an important step in saying that police misconduct is given justice. The justice is given to the victims in federal actions. Now, these actions are for civil damages, but that is a way to police conduct. And as the trial lawyers always say, it's true that trial lawyers are private attorney generals, because when they bring actions and they get judgments, then the tortfeasors are more likely to change their conduct to be within the contours of the law so as to protect themselves from financial penalties. And when they're not penalized or punished, they don't necessarily have that response. So it's a big stick, and it will help on the other side. As I say, there were differences about whether it should be by a Fourth Amendment violation, Eighth Amendment violation, or great bodily injury or death. It was chosen to go with just actions against law enforcement.
Steve, there's a lot of talk these days. Can I be heard? I can't hear. Hello? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There's a lot of talk these days about defunding the police. That's very modish at the moment. And I've seen concepts of it that go all the way from modifications of police function to abolishing departments. What is your reaction to those concepts?
I think it's I don't think most people who say that and use the signs and the phrases defund police really mean to get rid of the police. They mean to give more authority and to local groups that might be able to deal with things in a different way, and put more emphasis on mental health treatment, to have dispatchers maybe inquire more, to do in Austin, Texas, and to send, and in Portland, Oregon, I think those are two of the prime examples, to dispatch mental health personnel to certain calls they get rather than police, because they don't necessitate police if they're pursued in that fashion. I think Austin and Portland are good laboratories of democracy. See what they did. I do think there needs to be more training on mental health problems. There needs to be more mental health professionals. And some of the situations police have to deal with are not criminal per se. They're more mental health. They can be dealt with in another fashion. I don't think that most people think that we should have a society without police. You're going to continue, no matter what happens, to have murders and robberies and home burglaries and rapes and terrorists who could go into movie theaters or et cetera. And you need police for an ordered society, but they can be reformed and improved, given more help from social service agencies, and that's what I think. It's not part of this bill, but the bill does have has a kind of a carryover from the Obama efforts to help police and reform police, some authority to fund and create local task force and local groups that would look at local police to kind of help the police, not necessarily eliminate, to supplement the police. Police need to have better, they need to have better understanding of the community. We need more COPS programs, community-oriented policing, which I've supported for the whole time I've been in Congress. It hasn't been used as well as it could be, and police should be on the streets and friendly with people in the neighborhood and be seen as somebody who knows the neighbors, knows the community, and are seen in a favorable light by the citizens. That needs to happen, and that's a problem of implementation of the law. But I think that's the case.
And Congressman, I actually just spoke with Memphis Police Association President Mike Williams about a lot of these issues, including community policing. I mean, we know the experts say that is the heart of it. That is what needs to happen, but it's hard enough to recruit police officers right now. You know, they pulled police officers out of those community policing positions and put them on the streets because there's not enough funding. Police officers aren't paid well enough, you know, to keep them within departments. So is there any reason that community policing was left out of the bill? And do you think that there's potential to, instead of defund police departments, to get them more money to ensure that they can keep their community policing programs?
There's not new funding in this bill except for the programs that we create, which is the data collection and the data reportage of police misconduct, deadly force use, and the firing and terminating officers. There was a need for that because that's new funding. Some of the areas grants are conditioned on change policies that are for policies like the prosecutor in the bill. But I don't think there'll be any new funding for police. There's there are gaps in the city budgets, county budgets because of coronavirus, lack of sales tax collections, and I guess we'll have a lack of hotel collections, et cetera, the sales tax, and hotel taxes. So there's strapped for the budgets, and I don't know that we'll have. But I am looking and hoping that we can allow some of the money that we appropriated in the HEROES Act, as well as in the CARES Act, for state and local governments to go toward filling those gaps and not to have all that money simply for coronavirus direct expenses, which some governments, like in Memphis, the health departments of the county government, they have expenses and they've had costs. The city has had expenses and costs, but not the same because the health department's not under the city, it's under the county. So hope that they can use it. The direct effect of the coronavirus is to put a hole in the municipal budgets. I could see not having to go towards the retirement funds, even though there could be holes in retirement funds, but the way the stock market's going would be higher. They don't really need the money unless they were totally mismanaged in the past. There's been allegations about some states that have done that, but not Tennessee.
So do you think it is the federal government's job then to tell these local governments, you need to keep your community policing, programs in place and fill the gaps as needed? I mean, we saw with coronavirus, if we need money, we can come up with trillions of dollars. And I would argue that a lot of people are saying right now that need is there to ensure that these things are happening now.
Well, Memphis is going to get, I think, $9 million from the Department of Justice to hire a new officer. And I think the county may get some of that money too. So there's going to be money to hire officers, and that could supplant the monies that are being diverted from community policing. And so the monies could be there to do that. I agree that we need, if you take away funding, you're going to have less police, and we've had a problem with it. In Minneapolis, they're concerned about having officers hired from outside the city where the jurisdiction is. And that's a problem we've had in Memphis. I think we've allowed the local governments to hire people from outside of the jurisdiction. I think the COPS program so important never should have been changed. And that's what the money, there's federal monies went to local governments for COPS programs. I think the local government diverted those funds improperly. Should have kept them in the COPS program.
Congressman Cohen, this is Ryan Poe. Hey, how likely is it that some form of this bill will pass the Senate, do you think?
It's a tough standard, I guess, scale. I put it, some portion of the bill could pass. A lot of it probably will not. The Republicans tend to have different constituencies that we have in many areas, including policing. I don't see our bill as being anti-police. I'm certainly not anti-police. I spent the first 3.5 years of my professional life as an assistant city attorney, police legal advisor. I knew there were a lot of good people in the police department. Jack Wallace was one of my heroes and one of the finest people I ever knew. He, for a short while, was the chief of the police department. He was the deputy chief for a long time. There were a lot of other guys that were great. There's some people that aren't. But we need to fund the police department, and we need to have community-oriented policing. But I don't know if the Senate will pass it or not. I mean, the police unions tend to be pro-Republican. They used to be kind of okay, and they went with Barack because of Joe Biden. They've reacted harshly to Joe Biden's embrace of some of our programs, and the police unions used to be against assault weapons. They've changed some. They've kind of come under. There've been changes, so there'll be differences. It'll be tough in the Senate. I think in the House they were talking about a couple people they might get, one of whom was a former Republican, and one of whom is retiring and is an African American Republican. So those are the people they're trying to get, and even that looks like a tough sled. It's not promising. And if you don't get House Republicans, I don't see too much chance for senators. But the public will have to make their voices known, and Mitch McConnell will either have to with the people or not. And if he's not, he'll suffer the political consequences.
Congressman, do you think that the protests that we're seeing in the streets now here and in other cities, do you think that those could sway votes in the Senate?
I think they could. I think it shows a tremendous outpouring of public support, and it's not. It's kind of it's a cross section there. And when you see even you saw the bishop of the Episcopal Church in D.C. and the bishop of the Catholic Church in D.C. come out and talk about, of course, it was predominantly about the president's sorrowful display of the Bible and the use of the Bible in front of a church, and use of force, not deadly, but force to clear the Lafayette Park for his Churchill-like, George Bush-like action of going and holding up a Bible in front of that church. But I think you've seen a lot of people respond to the president and who believe that we do need to change. And I think it's not just young people, which is important, but it's a lot cross section of this country. And I think polling shows that most people, like 68%, think we need to do something. We need to do it now. We've waited too long. And I think it was the 40% area after Ferguson. Now it's in the upper 60s, middle 60s. The public's going to want to do this. And if the Republicans don't respond, I think they'll suffer at the polls. But then they've got a two-edged sword because they've got their base to deal with. And if they haven't had primaries, they may be concerned about that.
Is there anything that President Trump, given his limitations, which we know so acutely, anything that President Trump can do to defuse the situation or improve the outlook?
Resignation.
Okay.
That would make a lot of people happy. And I think it'd be good for the country. If he resigned, it'd be good for the country. Not that Pence is any John Kennedy.
Right.
And I knew Lloyd Benson. Any other questions?
We're down to about 4 minutes now.
Okay, well, that seems like we've kind of run out of questions, and that's probably just as well. I'm going to try to find, what did I do? What could I have done with my phone? Oh, there it is. I'm going to see if I left anything out and what the bill had in it that I might not have mentioned. Police Training and Independent Police Review Act, mentioned that. Police Camera Act, National Statistics of Deadly Force, mentioned that. National Standard for Use of Force, Anti-Lynching Bill, but that's been held up in the Senate by Rand Paul. Prohibits racial and religious profiling, and we've got, and it creates civilian review boards. So that's important issue as well. Otherwise, it's just like, I have not participated in any of the protests. Variety of reasons, including not wanting to be in a large crowd at this time, but I admire what they've been doing to bring focused attention on the issue, and I appreciate the fact that they have not, hasn't gone to riots in Memphis, which happened in the big cities of New York and Philly and even DC and other places, LA. We haven't had that, so I commend the folks who've been involved, the leaders like Devontae Hill and Frank Gotti, and the others as well, who I think have been responsible. Mr. Kendrick Johnson, I think is who it is, seems to be the leader on the other side. And I read where he helped a property owner whose property was defaced to clean up his property. And I think that was a noble act. But I think we've had good leaders here and good protests, and we have not suffered property and or loss of life. And thank you very much. I'll be off to Washington, and I'll be back quickly. Thank you.